Hi everyone. So it's time to talk about Poldark again. I've got Poldark on my mind constantly at the moment because it's going to be starting. The second series is going to start broadcasting here on Sunday. I am so excited. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I absolutely loved the trailer for the series. I thought it was brilliant, and there were certain moments I was gasping. I was so overjoyed. I was jumping up and down. I was so excited to see it because obviously I've read the book, so I actually seeing it how they're going to be depicting it, I thought that was just absolutely phenomenal, so I'm so excited. So I might as well talk about Poldark. Yay! So this time I'm going to be talking about books 7 and 8, which are The Angry Tide, that's number 7, and then number 8, The Stranger from the Sea. So, there's quite an interesting mix with this one, because this one covers a year, and it starts directly after the previous book, which, great. But then The Stranger from the Sea is set 10 years later. Now, there's a reason for this, and I'll explain that in a bit, but let's talk about The Angry Tide, first of all. So, as I said, yeah, this starts straight off where the last book ended, and the Ross's and Demelza's marriage is, setting back on track, as mentioned in my previous video that I read that bit at the end of the last book. So they're doing okay. There's more of an understanding between the two of them now than there has been for quite some time. But there's other stuff going on, other storylines that are starting to brew up again that are really quite interesting. Now, at the moment, Ross is an MP. He's been appointed an MP, so hey, well done, Ross. But George has gone and lost his seat, so he needs to get his seat back, in government. And who better than to go to Ross and try and get his seat back that way? So this man who has been, really doing everything he possibly can to destroy Ross in every possible way is now begging him a favour. And of course, that's going to lead to some frictions, as you can probably guess. So there's a lot to do with politics and such in this one, that because of obviously being an MP now with Ross' job and everything, but also politics in family, and what should you do in these certain situations. Overall, it's a really, really interesting read. Also, we've got situations with Morwenna and Drake, in case you've forgotten from my last video. Morwenna is Elizabeth's cousin. She came to look after Geoffrey Charles after Francis died, and of course when she married George. And Drake is Demelza's brother, who came to live with Ross and Demelza, and with his brother Sam as well, to start a new life, as a way, do something new. And the two of them met and fell for each other, and Geoffrey Charles, being really good friends with Drake, kind of, because obviously Morwenna has to always be there whenever she has to go with Geoffrey Charles everywhere, and he always wants to see Drake, so the two of them naturally formed a bond with each other. And Elizabeth wasn't happy about this whatsoever. Well, nor was George, but it was like, I got really angry at Elizabeth for what she does with Morwenna. So here comes a bit of spoilers for The Angry Tide, but the main spoiler thing I'm not going to do to the very end, because it's a topic that I want to discuss quite in depth, so this is only like a mini spoiler thing. Okay, so with the whole breaking Drake and Morwenna apart was a bit like, okay, Elizabeth, why did you force her into this horrible, horrible marriage? And I really hated Elizabeth for doing that. It was just awful. I mean, she herself has been through a marriage. Okay, so, well, I was just about to say loveless marriage, but no, she did love Francis, but it wasn't a love that was like burning her soul like she felt for Ross. She did love him, but it was she could be comfortable with Francis. I'll put it that way. Whereas Morwenna would never be comfortable with her husband that she was forced to take. So it's like, Elizabeth, surely you're in that situation of being with a man who don't love, really don't love, when you married George, you know what that feels like. So why in the hell are you putting your cousin through that hell? I really, really didn't like Elizabeth for doing that. It really angered me. And poor Rowena, I mean, to have to live through this knowing that the man that she loves is just over there and she can't get to him, and she has to deal with this horrible husband who beats her senseless. Um, and she can't divorce him, she can't do anything like that because she's a woman. There was no rights then for a woman to do that, really. Unless obviously she had lots of money and could, pay her way out of it. But even then, it'd be a huge scandal and nobody would go near her in society. So how a woman who is completely out of society do that? The answer is she can't. It's just like, oh, Elizabeth, really, really angered me when you did that. Now, other stuff that's going on, obviously, like I said, you've got the political stuff, which leads even, we've got murders and scandals, and it's really interesting also this one to look how people bought their way to levels of society to do things that they wanted to do. So thus George is buying his way back into Parliament and trying to do so via Ross. It's very interesting how these two characters interact with each other, and now Ross holds the power. He's the one who is in control. Continuing on with Geoffrey Charles, he's still being treated horribly by George and everything, but there is something that's happening in this one in regards to that Elizabeth is pregnant, and how obviously this child is definitely George's. And that is going to be a very interesting thing that gets played out, and I'm not going to go over that bit further because that is where the spoiler section is going to start, which I'm going to do at the end. Okay, so for the time being, everything's not too bad. Napoleonic War is still going on. As I said, there's a lot to do with politics and social standing and trips to London and making himself presented in society. There's that stuff being played out. There's not huge cataclysmic events really, apart from one, which I'm going to, as I mentioned, talk about at the end, because it happens right at the end of the book, and then you've got this 10-year jump, and the ramifications of that is quite interesting. Okay, so overall, good book. You can tell it's, to me, I could feel that there was something building up. I didn't anticipate what it was, and when it happened, I was quite taken aback by it in a very surprised way. I didn't anticipate I was going to feel what I felt when it happened, but then I didn't anticipate that it was going to happen. So yeah, it was an interesting one, to say the least. But yeah, you've got a lot of stepping into society and the games that get played to get where you need to be. So in a sense, it is quite kind of different than the other stories, because you haven't got like the mines or farming or that kind of thing. You've got politics instead, and it ends right at the end of 1799. So going into a new century, everything is new, and it's a way of going, right, let's see where this takes us. Okay, so that is The Angry Tide. So now I'm going to talk about The Stranger from the Sea. And straight off, because it's 10 years later, this is the moment where these books start to be about the next generation. I'm not saying that Ross and Demelza and that are shoved out the window, because they're not at all. It's still very much a family thing, but this is where the children start to grow into their own. Oh, one thing I forgot to say, sorry, about The Angry Tide. The Ennises, Dwight and Caroline, they've now got 2 children in this, because they've had ups and downs with their family to do with a child who passed away, and it was all very sad. But I loved how they played it out, and I remember, and I said to my sister when their first child died, I was really taken aback by Caroline's reaction, but then I wasn't at the same time. It's a really hard one, because Dwight, being a doctor, he knew that his child was sick and he never told his wife. So when it happened, she was really taken aback. She never wanted children. She hates children, can't stand being around them. But then being pregnant, it forced her um, to accept, this was happening to her. She grew to love this child, and then had the child taken away from her, it was a huge deal. And the fact that her husband knew that this child was dying and never told him, never said a word, it really threw her. And I I get why she acted the way that she did, but at points I was like, but he's united in grief as well. Surely they should come together. And my sister was like, no, don't be silly. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was just that initial read of it. I was just a bit I was think my head was in the wrong place or something. I don't know. I felt really weird about her reaction. But now, I've reread, bits of these Poldark books to prepare for these reviews, and now rereading it, I get that it was, she was right to, I think, react to the way that she did. But it's nice to see in this, but how their marriage has carried on. They've had two girls. They're in a good place. So that's really great. Anyway, back to The Stranger from the Sea. So this book is mainly focusing on the two older children. So you've got Jeremy Poldark, he's the eldest, and Clarence, she's the second eldest, and then the third is Isabella Rose. From what I can recall, I don't think she was born at the end of the Angry Tide. I think she was born in the time between the Angry Tide and The Stranger from the Sea. So she is really quite young in it. I really like Isabella. She's a really interesting character. But Jeremy, first and foremost, he's a really genuinely nice guy. He's very into engineering. He finds that very intriguing. Also the mines, he's very interesting in that, and his father's works and such. Clarence is a very interesting character. She can be quite bold. She's a bit of a free spirit. She'll say what she thinks, but she also knows, I think because of her father's position with the NP and everything, and going to balls and presenting herself as she needs to and everything, as she has to. She is very she knows the point where she's going past the line. She'll pull back. She'll do what's right, what's respectable. What a good girl does. But she still, she likes to, like her mum, when she's at home, she'll, kick off her shoes and say what she likes and everything. So she's very much a mixture of Ross and Demel's. Ross being with his, he's able to, sit in society quite well and know how to work a room, as it were, at a party. But she's got her mother's spirit, and I really like that about Clarence. And The Stranger from the Sea is a man called Stephen Carrington, who literally Jeremy pulls him from the sea. He's been washed up on the beach outside Nampara, and Stephen's an interesting one. Again, he's one of these guys. He's got a really big heart, really lovely heart, but he really is quite silly about what he does sometimes. He likes gambling. He doesn't mind picking a fight. He's he's really he's a diamond in the rough. Rough around the edges. You can think of him quite in a harsh light sometimes, but he is a nice guy overall. So he and Clarence, they kind of fit the mold with each other. How she can be quite rough and kind of vivacious and such in her private life, but out in public, she's very picturesque kind of girl. Whereas Stephen is quite picturesque and really lovely and that on the inside, but on the outside he's rough and harsh and and everything. So the two of them just kind of fit the mold with each other, and it's about their relationship developing into love. But of course society always, you know, kind of comes in way, and they go, oh no, he's not right for you, he's, you know, not of your level of society, and oh, you should go off and marry this man and all this lot. And it's, yeah, all about the things that get in their way. At the same time, Geoffrey Charles, because it's 10 years later, he has grown up to be a soldier. He really is constantly in contact with Ross, who he always refers to as uncle, even though Ross is technically his, I think, his cousin or some. There's some because of the Poldark lines and everything. So, and he even laughs about it in one of his letters, saying, "Oh, I call you uncle all the time, but really I'm your cousin," sort of thing. And it's really nice that he has that relationship. The reason why he has that with Ross now, obviously George, I'll discuss that over the spoiler thing, because his relationship with George is just nowhere. And Drake and Morwenna have now married. They've got a child. They're living away. So and I'll explain why that's happened as well in a minute in the spoiler bit. So it's kind of Drake's moved on. His well, not adopted dad, but you know what I mean. His view of what a father should be has moved on with his life, and now, and just as Geoffrey Charles is growing up and moving on with his, and he needs someone to speak with who he knows he can trust. And everything, and he chooses Ross, and it's really nice. I think that's really lovely that Geoffrey Charles has Ross in his life, who he can freely, you know, talk with and get support from, and know that he is there always. That is just wonderful. I'm so happy that relationship between the two of them has been written into these books. So overall, yeah, you've got this, as I said, the Angry Tide, you can feel that it's building up to something. It's kind of quite dark and creepy, but because of all of these things. And then when you've got the leap to 10 years later, everything feels more fresh and open, and I think it's because of that amount of time, and also because you're introducing these new characters. Even though they are the children that we've read growing up throughout these books, this is the point where they're you know, it's not Clarence, I think in The Angry Tide, I think she's about 6, and Jeremy's probably about 7 or 8. So they are now 16 and 17 or 18. So they're you know, teenagers. They're coming into their own. They've got their own personalities and everything now, and so it's really, they are new characters in a sense, which is really lovely to see. So right, so now here comes the spoiler section. If you don't want to be spoiled, please turn off this video. If you do turn off, thank you for watching, and if you've got any comments, let me know in the comments box below. But if you want to stay, here we go. You're about to see spoils. Now, The Angry Tide. There is a huge event that ends the end of this book, which, as I said, I wasn't anticipating would necessarily happen. I wanted it to happen, but I didn't know how I'd feel about it, and that is the death of Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth makes some very strange choices in the course of her life, that, you know, getting Morwenna married off and marrying George, which means she's had to basically cut out her son from her life because he's taken control. And, you know, as I said in my previous video, sends him to his room every night. Morwenna looks after him, not Elizabeth. You know, she's kept kind of away from her son. And then she discovers that she's pregnant. And she's got a problem now, because in order to make it seem that George was her son Valentine's father. Oh, I forgot to mention Valentine in this video. So sorry. Valentine, he's very much been, you know, smothered in gifts and all that. He's the focus, 100% focus of George. He gets showered with gifts and all that, like, while Geoffrey Charles gets shoved at the back of the room and he doesn't care about him. He doesn't want him anywhere near him or anything. So anyway, sorry, back to Elizabeth. So because she's discovered that she's pregnant, in order to make George believe that Valentine was, you know, fathered by George, because of the timeline when they married and everything, when they first slept together after their marriage, she had to pretend that Valentine was premature. But this time, because she had that situation, she comes to the conclusion to make it genuine, to make George genuine believe that he fathered this child as well, even though he did, but to make it so that they're quite similar, she has to make sure she goes into premature labour. I know the logic sounds a bit weird, but when you read it, you'll understand exactly where she's coming from and everything. And I was a bit like, oh my god, what are you going to do to yourself? So she gets some drink, kind of like well, it's not a poison, but a vial of something, from an apothecary to trigger early labour, which she does. It works. She has the baby. There we go. It's a little girl called Ursula, who again gets absolutely showered with presents and spoiled rotten by her father. She looks exactly like George in every possible way, so that makes it more obvious that, and quite like Elizabeth as well. She goes to be quite beautiful like Elizabeth, but it makes Valentine stand out compared to her. Thus, make George question the parentage and everything, but at that time, but with Elizabeth, with the premature birth, triggered her to be very ill. She lost loads and loads of blood and everything, and Ross hears that she is very ill. He goes to the house, and George doesn't want him to enter, and he's saying, oh, but I've seen Elizabeth, she'll want to see me. And he went, well, not anymore, she's dead, she died 2 hours ago. And Ross thinks he's kidding. He's like, oh, crying out loud, why would I kid? And lets him in. And Ross goes upstairs, and it's so God, it really got me. The room in which Elizabeth died and Ross sees her body is the room in which the rape / consensual sex, depending on how you read it, that they had at the end of 4th book happened. It's in that same room, and he goes in, and the smell is overpowering because she's actually got gangrene from her insides, burning through her inside out while she was still alive. So her body is rotting. Even though she's only been dead for a couple of hours, and there's bowls of blood everywhere, and it's, oh my god, it is horrific reading this. And he describes like the way that her skin feels to the touch and everything, and how she's like marble. And Ross, he really has to hold back being sick because of the smell, and he kisses her just on the forehead, or it's not kiss, and then leaves and has this like breakdown. He's off walking all night, and Demelza meets him at the house, and the two of them have a talk, and they come back together to be a support for each other. And I have to, even though I was thinking, because I was telling my sister as I was reading the books, God, Elizabeth, what the hell is wrong with you? God, and I said, I really want her to suffer, like really die in a horrific way. I'm so angry at her. And then when it happened, I couldn't believe it. I was really upset. I don't know, maybe I just said that because it was the first thing that popped into my head. I don't know, but when she actually died, because of how horrific it was, the fact that her body was rotting from the inside out while she was still alive, she went through all that suffering. She nearly, she could have killed her child, and very luckily that she didn't. And all of that to prove that to her husband, that he fathered their child, even though he definitely did father their child. She felt the need to do that. That is so sad. But yeah, it means that this huge part of Ross's life, his love for Elizabeth, is over. Well, obviously not fully over, because he'll always love a part of her in his soul, always, but she'll never be there. She'll never be there to taunt him, to try and seduce him, to just constantly be there in his mind. She's gone now. And as he says something after he's been walking all night, and he comes back, he says to Demelza, it's going to be 1800 next, the next week or next day, or something like that. And Demelza said, well, it's the start of a new century, it's the start of a new chapter in our life, and they go forward into the next century. It's a really sad, really hard, really interesting moment. But the fact, as I said, because it happened in that exact same room that she died in as they slept together, the way that she died, it really is, God, it is huge. And the effect that it then has on George, who tries to shove Geoffrey Charles, send him to boarding school, shove him away, don't want him anywhere near me, I don't care about him anymore, and his mother's not here to keep me to prevent me from doing that. Yeah, it's very sad, but yeah. So yeah, that's how I'm going to end this video. Sorry it's ended on a bit of a downer, but huge events that happen in books, it tend to happen. So that was The Angry Tide, where we've said, goodbye to Elizabeth, and The Stranger from the Sea, where we're saying hello to Jeremy and Clarence, and the cute infant Isabella Rose, quite vivacious little character that she is, running around constantly, singing and stuff. She's an absolute joy as Isabella Rose in Stranger from the Sea and the other books that she's in. But we'll be hearing more about her life and everything in later books. Anyway, if you've stuck around to listen to the spoiler section, thank you so much for doing so. If you want to leave me a comment, you can in the comment box below, or if you want to show how what you thought of this book another way, you can give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, entirely up to you. I'd love to know what you think. And I'll be back soon, hopefully with another Poldark video soon, talking about books 9 and 10. And if I don't see you before Sunday, when about Poldark, when the next Poldark series starts, I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to as well. I'm going to be watching it live and also recording, so I can watch it over and over again. And then of course I'll buy the DVD and then I can watch that over and over again because I love it. But anyway, all right then, bye.